Hi there, this is Solitary Ronin from Solitary Ronin Films, and welcome to another random review. And today's random review is The Breaking Point, directed by Michael Curtiz in 1950, starring John Garfield. This is the Criterion Region A Blu-ray, spine number 889, for those of you counting at home. This comes with a new 2K digital restoration, a new interview with critic Alan K. Rode, who wrote Michael Curtiz, A Life in Film, a new interview with actor and acting instructor Julie Garfield on her father, John Garfield, a new video essay by Taylor Ramos and Tony Zhu analysing Curtiz's methods, an excerpt from the 1962 episode of Today showing contents of the Ernest Hemingway house in Key West, Florida, including items related to Have and Have Not, the novel on which Breaking Point is based. Also with Criterion you get a nice little booklet with one essay in it. This is a very interesting film, like I said on the extras, based on the Hemingway book To Have and Have Not, which was obviously more famously filmed by Howard Hawks 6 years earlier in 1944, starring Humphrey Bogart as Captain Harry Morgan and Lauren Bacall. But I think Michael Curtiz's film is closer to the book. They did add domestic scenes with his wife Lucy, played by Phyllis Thaxter, who steals the show really. Michael Curtiz is often viewed as a kind of journeyman and studio hack, but I think that's a little unfair. He started making films in 1912 in Hungary and made a bunch of films before Jack Warner found him and brought him over to the States in 1926. Obviously he's more famous for Casablanca, but he also did The Adventures of Robin Hood, and he pretty much did every genre because, as Alan K. Rode says in his interview, he was addicted to making films, so he always wanted to work, so that's why he just made westerns and swashbucklers and film noirs and pretty much everything he could make. Some actors didn't like him because he shouted a lot, he had a very short fuse. Other actors liked him. Joan Crawford was a big fan. But let's talk about The Breaking Point. Again, I think this is grittier, darker, and certainly bleaker than the Howard Hawks film. It's a film that sadly, I mean, I wasn't really aware of it before I picked up the Criterion, because it was pretty much buried by Jack Warner, because in 1950, the year of its release, it coincided with the first list of people in America in the arts who may have been Reds, and unfortunately John Garfield's name was on that list, and you could argue that the pressure to name names drove John Garfield to his early grave with his heart attack. And Jack Warner, who at one point said about The Breaking Point that they might have another Casablanca in their hands, as soon as that list came out, he pretty much buried the film, and John Garfield as well. So it tells the story of Captain Harry Morgan, who's struggling to survive running a charter boat. He takes this couple down to Mexico, but he has been paid. and the man gets the plane home and pretty much doesn't pay him, so he's desperate, and there's this shady character that he bumps into who's a kind of middleman for even more shady characters, and he kind of agrees for money to take some Chinese people on his boat from Mexico back into the States. Things go badly. He gets back to the States. He is more angry, more frustrated, more desperate. He takes out on his wife. Again, Phyllis Thaxter isn't an actress that I'm that familiar with, but she's really good in this. I mean, she's strong, which she has to be. Their relationship, you can still tell they're sexually attracted to each other. You can still tell that they love each other, even though he's like, since he came back from the war, obviously he's a little bit different from what he was when he went to the war, as quite a lot of people were when they came back from World War II. So again, his situation gets more desperate. People want bills, people want to take his boat away. His boat is kind of taken away for a short while the Coast Guard are investigating what happened in Mexico. You have this femme fatale character played by, if I can remember her name, I should really remember her name, Patricia Neal, who is as hard-boiled as they come. She kind of drifts in and out of his life. Obviously she was the woman in Mexico, but she kind of drifts in and out of the picture, and she gets all the best lines. Again, a really hard-boiled performance. She's obviously having loads of fun with the role. So again, through desperation, he goes to this shady lawyer who has a job. So he goes and meets these guys that are obviously gangsters, and they are going to rob a racetrack, and they want to use his boat essentially as an escape vehicle. So again, he's backed into a corner. Through desperation, he takes the job, but he kind of has in his mind that he's going to somehow overcome these guys and get the reward. The robbery at the racetrack, which is obviously 5 years before Stanley Kubrick's Killing, is nicely done. They take the lawyer along for ballast, and they escape quite ingeniously, get on the boat, and escape with their loot. I'm not going to tell you anything else, but it's a fairly realistic, gritty and bleak ending. It's beautifully shot. I mean, the cinematography is stunning. Curtiz and his kind of fluid camera work as it just follows people around and they cross each other, and it's a beautifully shot film. The lighting is exquisite. There's an interesting, his ship's mate, played by Juano Hernandez, who's a Cuban American, and every time you see a person of colour in Hollywood films from the 30s, 40s and 50s, you're kind of crossing your fingers that it doesn't go into like really stereotypical Hollywood film portrayal of black characters or people of colour, but there's no trace of like stereotyping. He's an equal. It's a really good character. Curtiz had used Hernandez before, and the last shot of the film, which is a beautiful crane shot, is one of the most devastating last shots in cinema history. It's a pretty heartbreaking final shot. I'm not going to tell you any more than that. It's just a beautiful film, well acted, beautifully shot. It has this wonderful air of fatalism, which obviously I'm a big fan of. A wonderful air of a man being trapped by his circumstances. Even at the end of the film, he has a wonderful choice to make. It's just a great film. I'd never seen it before, but it did kind of blow me away. And it's just pretty sad that it got buried. And obviously it's pretty sad what happened to John Garfield. Because being badgered into naming names probably did lead to his early death, or was certainly one of the contributing factors to his early death. So it's a pretty sad film and a pretty sad kind of background to the film, but I wouldn't let that put you off. It's a stunning little noir, even though there's lots of sunshine and it's shot through in the day, but it is a crushing little noir. Again, I like to have and have not, but it's a more, not cheesy, but it's a more kind of Hollywood light kind of film, whereas The Breaking Point is much darker, and for that kind of reason I think it's well worth your time. So thanks very much for watching this random review of The Breaking Point from 1950. Please let me know in the comments below whether you've seen it and what you think of it, and hopefully you'll join me again for more random reviews. This is Solitary Ronin from Solitary Ronin Films saying farewell.